There's no GTM strategy for DevTool companies without technical content. And for every DevTool company, we always say that adoption runs on trust. So developers adopt when they can trust, they can test, verify, and see your product solving a real problem. Before writing a single piece of content, I like to step back and run through a framework that gives me the full picture of what I want to do. So I call it the 4WH framework: the what, the who, the why, the where, and how. So once you have this in place, you can see the picture will build itself.
Is there any particular format that developers actually like reading and sharing?
When I design content briefs, I always emphasize two things: the uniqueness and practicality.
Once a piece is live, how do you make sure that it actually reaches the right audience?
We rely heavily on developer communities and social media to get it in front of the right audience. A few days after publishing, we usually...
Hey, so today we're talking about something that every dev tool thinks about, but very few get right, which is technical content, right? So how do you create content which not only educates developers, but also drives adoption and revenue? And to help unpack this, I'm joined by Bassey from HackMamba. Henry works with some of the most exciting developer-first companies, helping them build content that resonates with developers and drives business outcomes. So Henry, before we dive in, could you share a bit about your journey and the work you're doing at HackMamba?
Yeah. Thank you, Disha. It's a pleasure talking with you today. So I'm Henry, and I'm the head of technical content at HackMamba, and we help dev tool companies drive their GTM through content. So we work with some of the dev tools you might come across, the popular ones and the less popular ones, just trying to make them popular and get their products out there so developers can adopt and get to use.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Henry, and really look forward to our conversation today. So Henry, you work with a lot of developer-first companies, right? So let's start a little broad. Why do you feel technical content is such a critical part for GTM for a dev tool?
I've had the brush with some companies that are still confused if they should adopt, if they should invest in content. And we've also had clients that move from content marketing to sales-led strategy. So yeah, this is a very critical question. And I always say there's no GTM strategy for dev tool companies without technical content. Yeah, so because it's the core of developer marketing. And even beyond dev tool, if you are looking at the first principle of marketing, we say marketing exists to connect what people need with what you offer. And what's that connection? What's that bridge that connects your product and what people need? There are lots that goes into there, and one of them is content. Yeah, content is that bridge. It translates a developer's search for whether a fix, whether proof, or a better way to do stuff into your product. And for every dev tool company, we always say that adoption runs on trust. So developers adopt when they can trust, they can test, verify, and see your product solving a real problem, right? That is why technical content is essential, because it drives that discovery, it supports evaluation, and it fuels advocacy. Yeah.
Understood. What role does technical content play in sort of creating awareness and adoption, and does it also create conversions?
So yeah, we love to have this discussion about conversion. I think most people that are investing in content, they don't want just that educating part. They want to see it drive results. Yeah, but when we say conversion, I usually think that conversion is a black box. In terms of developer marketing, it's a black box. So we have to unpack it. In dev marketing, it could mean a sign up, it could mean a GitHub star, it could mean a trial, or even someone dropping your SDK into their side project. So if we say the role of content is just convert, we haven't said much at all. So I think the better way to look at great technical content is through the roles it plays. And for me, there are four of them, right? The first of all is I've mentioned proof before, so I will still hammer on that. It's a proof. Content should dispel doubts by showing the product works in practice, right? And that might be maybe a demo environment, or a reproducible setup guide, or even a side-by-side comparison with alternatives. Then second for me is enablement, right? So the best content gets developers to their first win, and also quickly. And that could be a copy and paste snippet, it could be a starter template, or maybe a 5-minute quick start that allows them to experience your tool in action. And the third one is trust. We love this part. We love to say trust. So the developers trust honesty. So you should show it with trade-off discussion, and lessons from failed experiments, or a candid here's why, here's where our product doesn't fit section. And that openness signals that credibility. I love how most of our partners are doing this. When we write content for them, they always want us to state where the product doesn't fit in, and that helps build that trust. Then the fourth and the last one is advocacy, right? So great content spreads when it is easy to use and share with others. So that could be like checklists, reference diagrams. It could be walkthroughs that make a developer to look smart when they drop them into their workspace, or maybe send them to their colleagues. So beyond just education, I would argue that the great technical content proves, enables, build trust, and fuels advocacy. And those roles are what eventually drives the adoption or the conversion we are all looking for. And beyond that, you have this credibility that will drive your brand reputation.
So if I'm a founder or a product marketing person, and I'm sort of commissioned to write a blog post, what is the very first thing I should clarify before writing a single line? Is it the audience? Is it the journey stage? How do you actually begin that journey?
Okay, all those are very important. whether the audience, the journey stage, the pain point. But before writing a single piece of content, I like to step back and run through a framework that gives me the full picture of what I want to do. So I call it the 4WH framework: the what, the who, the why, the where, and how. So once you have this in place, you can see the picture will build itself. So I start with what is this topic really about? What's the current conversation in the industry, and where does my perspective fit? So then the why will be like, why this topic now? Is it a problem urgent enough that people care and want to solve immediately? Then I now move to, who am I writing for? What's their pain points and what do they want to achieve? Then where are they in the journey? Are they just exploring, or are they close to making that decision? And finally, how does my solution naturally fit into this workflow? So when I run through those questions, I'm not just writing a piece of content. I'm building an end-to-end story that connects the problem, the reader, and the solution in a way that feels so natural and compelling, right?
Okay, so I want to understand that, are there any elements of a technical content, or is there any particular format that developers actually like reading and sharing?
I think when I design content briefs, I always emphasize two things. That's the uniqueness and practicality. Yeah, I'll break that down. I usually think of content as content marketing as a room full of knowledgeable people having a conversation. So the way you contribute determines if people want to stop and listen or simply walk away. Yeah, so imagine someone in that room says developers hate marketing, or any other topic people are having that conversation. You could either nod along, or you could say, for me, I would say, I get where you're coming from, but I don't think they do so, and here's why. So that second response pushes that conversation deeper, and that's what content should do: bring that unique perspective instead of repeating what everyone else has already said. And the second piece is practicality, right? So your content must provide the reader with something they can use immediately. So you don't need to give me 1,500 word essay that leaves me with nothing actionable. So I always advocate proof and practicality over prose. And if a developer walks away with a solution they can test immediately, then the content has done its job. So these are the elements you need to see in technical content that someone will enjoy reading.
Understood. And how do you actually decide what is it that you'd like to write about? This is where developers would generally see a problem, and this is something that I should solve with content.
When people come to us, I work in an agency and it's quite different. So they must have had the topic in mind, or if they don't have that topic in mind, they come to us. Okay, these are our audience, these are products, this is what we want to do. So first of all, you need to research your audience. Yeah, get to discover their pain points, what issues they are facing, and then the next step is to know how your product will solve that problem. So most times we get into social media to run our research, get on Reddit and all those channels developers are in, and then you might run through the conversations they're having and pick ideas from that. That's how we now collect ideas and use it to build our brief, which we later develop into technical content.
Just trying to understand, that all dev tools understand that technical content is very important and everyone is trying to crack it. But what are some of the biggest mistakes and most common mistakes that you see people when they're creating technical content?
So there are a lot of mistakes, right? There are a lot of mistakes. But I think two are the most outstanding and could actually threaten the effectiveness of your technical content. So either teams are pushing their product too early in the article, and that could break trust, or they get too scared of even introducing their product to avoid backlash. I know of clients that I've worked with that are facing this issue. So I've seen both extreme. But on the first mistakes, because of they want visibility and they want to drive conversion faster, they shove the product into content without building that narrative. So imagine you are writing a tutorial, instead of showing the tool in one line, you build from the problem, explain the technologies that can solve it, and then introduce your product as one of the natural enablers. So if you do this well, it slides into the reader's subconsciousness as part of the workflow. Then regarding the second mistake, many teams are hesitant, like I mentioned, to integrate their product into content. One way to overcome this is to create a narrative tension that makes the product the obvious choice. For instance, I had this one client that needed to introduce their product in a top of funnel content. Every top of funnel content is very hard to productize. Yeah, so because it's informational, you're just supposed to teach, you don't market to them. So, but how I approach this is I created a gap in the brief that will naturally lead to the product, in terms of, okay, after learning about this, you see how it's hard to deploy due to how different the languages and the frameworks are. But we have a workaround we'll show you at the end of the tutorial, so you can easily deploy without issues. And that led us to introduce the product naturally into the top of funnel content that we wrote for this client. And for me, the mistake isn't the product inclusion itself, is doing it without the narrative. And with the right flow, your product feels inevitable.
Understood. So instead of just talking about your product in one line, you are positioning it as a natural solution to the problem that the devs will be facing, and then you talk about the entire story and you build the entire narrative.
Exactly.
Understood. And you spoke about top of funnel content. So just wanted to understand how do you think about technical content in top of funnel, middle of funnel, and bottom of funnel? And do we have any bottom of funnel technical content, or should it all be top of funnel?
People always say, I'm always against top of funnel content. Actually, you just need to understand that marketing is a system. We used to write top of funnel content, and that's where all the educational article resides. But these days, where AI can easily summarize, I think top of funnel is losing that impact. So there's one article I wrote sometime that all CMOs should prioritize top of funnel content, and that really brought us on fire. But then we have top of funnel, we have middle of funnel, we have bottom of funnel. So as marketing a system, you should just find a way to bring all these into view. You shouldn't just do top of funnel and leave the rest because you don't want to be salesy or you just want to educate developers. So have a ratio between top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, and middle of funnel, bottom of funnel could be your case studies, all those your product tutorials, your benchmarks. I know of clients that always want to produce benchmarks to compare with other competitors, and that will give developers the visibility into what they should expect if they integrate your product. So yeah, as a system, you should always focus on bring all these top of funnel, middle, and bottom into your strategy, so that you're not just dishing out free education and then nothing is working, no conversion after all these efforts.
And that you mentioned that one should maintain a good ratio between your top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel content, right? Just wanted to understand how do you decide that ratio? So if I'm publishing X amount of top of funnel, how much should I publish bottom of funnel content, or does it depend on my growth journey?
Oh yes. So actually, yeah, growth journey is part of it. But how I think about this is that um let's say you are a new company, because we always have companies that come with new products. So if I a new product, you need to align your new product with the current ranking so that you get a chance to rank in terms of SEO. So what we do for that, we write up like, let's say, a ratio of 30% or 40% top of funnel content, just to educate the industry about this product. You can have something like what is composable architecture, but your product is AI composability. But you need to tap into that general topic in order to bring people into to introduce your own product that is AI embedded, that can even make them work faster. So we allocate like 40% to top of funnel. Then as you produce all this, as you produce the top of funnel, you also need to back them up with product specific content like tutorials to show people after that they must have been introduced to the content, and then they understand your architecture. You have to show them how it works. This is where we bring in the middle of funnel content. So we have like, let's say, like 30% of those. Depending on, I work in an agency, it will always be different. So yeah, you need to show them how it works. Then beyond that, there's always this kind of comparison article, which is like bottom of funnel. You want to pitch your product against others in the industry to see if yours is a better fit for this for your audience, and that will make up to, let's say, 20% of your content strategy. So that's how we see it, we go about it.
Understood. Thank you for sharing that framework, Henry. I think very helpful for someone who's sort of starting out their content journey to understand what is it that they need to focus on. Could you walk us through your own process of writing technical content? From ideation to publishing, how do you create a strong technical piece?
For me, a strong technical piece has to fit into the larger marketing plan, right? So I always start from there. I want to know what's your marketing plan for this quarter. Then what's the strategy? Who is your ICP? What do they care about? And what are their pain points? So I need to know this high level information. Then from there, we go deep into the product. Like, how does it solve the problem? What's the philosophy behind it? Because without that philosophy, your content will not be that unique. So how is it different from competing alternatives? Then at HackMamba, what we do is that we host demos with the company to take us through how the product works with our technical writers. So we run the demos, to see how it works in practice, identify the quirks, and determine the workarounds and developers might need. Then from there, I look for the best line of topics or keywords we can build on. So sometimes I go through the Google Search Console data, or other times it's through the use cases or topic categories. Then once I have that foundation, I cluster the ideas using what this principle I call MISI. I actually learned that from McKinsey. So the way you cluster your topic should be mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive per cluster. So that way we completely cover a space without repeating ourselves or causing keyword cannibalization. So once your clusters are set, I develop topics and titles based on the real pain points and search intents, right? Then I create brief, which I run through my 4WH framework I mentioned earlier: the what, who, why, where, and how, to make sure the article speaks to the audience and ties naturally to the product. And finally, we get into the writing. I always remind people that technical writing is both arts and science, right? So the science is the factual accuracy, the code, and and the benchmarks. So the art is the storytelling, the rhythm, the readability. So when you blend all those two, you get content that developers not only trust but actually enjoy reading.
Understood. No, any tools, Henry, that you use to create content? Anything that helps you?
Every piece of content undergoes at least 5 stages of review before it even reach the client. So those stages enforce quality using standards, reference models, and tight feedback loops. Then the standards are simple. They're very simple but strict. So we always ask can another engineer replicate the steps in this tutorial exactly as we've written it. Then is the language simple and scannable? Does it match the reader's situation and funnel stage? Are claims in this article proven with code, with data, or case studies? And does it leave the reader with something actionable? And does it respect developer culture and house style? Then and finally, does it show trade-offs and edge cases? If the piece doesn't check those boxes, we don't ship it. Then beyond the QA, we also use storytelling frameworks like PASS, you know, problem, agitation, and solution, for example, to help us structure the problem. Then, but what I rely on mostly is the framework I developed internally over years of reviewing and editing content. I call it the RX framework. So it's just like UX. UX designers have their UX. So the idea is to design a reading journey the same way you design a user journey. The writing has to guide attention and emotion and momentum without bumps or friction. So the reader doesn't even notice they are being guided. So I've had people tell me they started when they start reading my articles, they didn't even realize they've reached the end. And that's the RX in action. So it captures attention, builds that momentum, and leads the reader to a climax. So I'm planning to make this public soon, but for now, it's what we use internally to keep the tone consistent and the quality high.
Understood. And you also spoke about something very interesting that writing technical content is a mix of both art and science. So do you feel that specifically in technical content writing, you need to be an engineer to be able to understand their pain and write how they feel, or do you feel that that's something that anyone can pick up?
Wow. This is an interesting question. Because at HackMamba, we say our writers are first of all engineers. So I think it's good you have that technical background because you can't write for someone you don't understand them. You've not been where they are. So myself, I started from web development, so I have a lot of technical background before I moved into developer marketing. So it's a mix of technical and marketing. So I think you need to be a software engineer or any of those professions before you can be an effective technical writer.
Understood. And before we move on, do you feel that there is any brand which is doing a great job with technical content writing?
Yeah, so this might sound biased because I work in technical content, technical agency, but I think our clients are doing a great job at that. Yeah. So, but one I personally admire is Bright Data, also one of our clients. They set a really high bar for technical debt and transparency. They have a very strong demand for technical debt, and on top of that, they're radically transparent. They always address all these legal and privacy issues head on instead of avoiding them. Then they take a developer first approach. They want to see the code, the benchmarks, and use cases, and they will have us enforce that. If the article does not have all those ingredients, they'll reject it, and we have to rewrite that. And the fourth one, they write with narrative authority. What I admire most is that they don't mind if we rank competing tools above them. So far, the specs are right. That kind of breadth-free and transparency is quite rare, and it's exactly what builds long-term credibility. So beyond our client, I would say Stripe. Yeah, they've become like the industry standard for everything documentation. So developers often reference Stripe. So not just because they are payments infrastructure, but for what good developer experience should look like. So at HackMamba, we even use Stripe as a tagline. My CEO will always say we build Stripe level documentation. So that's the kind of the standard that I've built over the years. Yeah.
All right. So I think we've covered, how you create high quality content and what your process looks like. But of course, I think publishing that content is just half the battle, right? The other half is making sure that people actually see it, and that gets us into distribution and conversion. So once a piece is live, how do you make sure that it actually reaches the right audience?
But then we rely heavily on developer communities and social media to get it in front of the right audience. A few days after publishing, we usually cross-post to dev communities with a canonical link back to the original post. I've even seen cases where the post we made on a dev community outran our original article. So then for social, it depends on the type of content. So if it's not leadership or business related, we usually post them on LinkedIn. Anything that's code heavy or deeply technical, it goes on Twitter or X. And Reddit is a tough nut for us, and we are still figuring out how to crack that distribution channel. Then but beyond channel, the real work is the presentation because people struggle with this a lot. Distribution isn't just dropping a link and calling it a day. You think people will click. I spend time to write captions like I'm writing in the new post. So I have to hook the reader I have to agitate the problem, and I need to tease the solution without giving out everything. So I need to build that curiosity for them to click and read the full piece. So sometimes we also repurpose content into short form video for platforms like TikTok and YouTube Shorts. So the rule of thumb is every piece of distribution should stand on its own and deliver value so that the audience feels compelled to go deeper. That's how to make this distribution work for you. And I think these days most platforms wants to retain their audience without them clicking out. So that's why we have this current zero-click paradigm. So you just need to make sure that you provide value whichever platform you are, and then if they're interested enough to click, I want to read the full piece.
Sorry. Understood. And then what about sales? So we understood, how marketing can sort of distribute this technical content. But do you feel that SDRs and A's can actually use technical content for their outreach and make conversations more meaningful?
At HackMamba, we've used it in 3 ways. First, as a proof of work. So when we are talking to a promising prospect, we send them samples of content we've created, or even case studies that show how similar companies use a solution and what the outcome was. That kind of evidence smooths the path to conversion. And secondly, as an objection handling, right? So we take the real questions from sales calls and turn them into content. Then we then it's no longer just saying trust us. It's documented evidence that can test or share internally. And third, so it can also act as a direct enablement. So if a prospect has a problem, you can send them a tutorial that walks through exactly how they could overcome it using your product. That turns the sales conversation into something hands-on and helpful, which builds trust much faster. And I think in outreach, technical content works as proof as objection handling and as well as enablement. It equips sales team with artifacts that substantiate their claims.
Understood. And have you seen or do you remember any piece of content that really moved the needle, maybe helped open doors or build credibility or growth pipeline?
That's actually a tough question because attribution in marketing is always messy. Yeah, but what I've seen is that the impact of great content usually compounds beyond discovery, beyond adoption and advocacy. The biggest impact is credibility and brand recall. Yeah. So if I ask you, where's your go-to source for developer tutorials? The fact that a name can instantly comes to mind is the impact of content. So take Mozilla Developer Network, for example. It's become the canonical reference for web development. So developers don't even bother to question its accuracy. MDN is simply the standard. So that's brand credibility built entirely on consistently excellent, well-maintained content. Or even this company, HashiCorp, their tutorials are guides around Terraform and faults and shaped how engineers understand the whole categories like infrastructure as code. So I've seen engineers cite their tutorials to justify architectural decisions inside their companies. So that's content turning into influence. So yes, attribution is hard, but the real impact is of content is that it compounds into that trust. When your brand becomes the reflexive answer to where do I go to learn X or where do I go to learn Y, you've gone beyond marketing. Your content has become the infrastructure for the community.
Understood. But Henry, how do you make sure that your content stands out if everyone is trying to talk about the same problems?
Always advocate for subject matter expertise, and this is also why I have problem with top of funnel content. The only way to stand out is to bring your internal experts to tell the story from your own perspective. Because if I'm opening an article and I'm reading the same thing, close it, open the second one, I'm reading the same thing, then it doesn't make any sense. But once you bring in your internal leaders and they tell you how they're solving this problem, what unique unique perspective they're introducing into this, your content will you see how the content will be transformed. So that's what I'm applying to all the clients that are coming to work with us. So each before we start writing, if they want to write up a funnel or have this conversation with them, tell us everything you know about this and what's your perspective, what's that angle that we can come in, so that we'll not just create the same article or regurgitate what is already been stated.
Makes sense, Andy, makes sense. And finally, when it comes to measuring success, I know we discussed this, that it's very difficult to attribute things, your conversion, etc., or metrics to marketing. But what metrics should a team look at beyond just page views? Yeah. So I was just asking that, when it comes to measuring success, I know we discussed that it's very difficult to attribute conversions, etc., to marketing. But what metrics should a team look at beyond just page views?
I think before you even start writing content, you must have known what you want to achieve with that. Yeah. So teams usually give us the expectation. Okay, this is what we want. Maybe we want more GitHub stars, or maybe we want to drive sign-ups. So yeah, but I get it. People, we like to say all these page views and impressions are vanity metrics, but I don't believe that's so. But as I said earlier, marketing is a system. Everything works together to drive the ultimate goal. So without the page views or impression, how would you know that people are seeing your content? You wouldn't know.
Yeah.
And if you have let's say on social media, you post stuff and no one is engaging, there's no way you can convert. So everything, like Likes, share, impressions usually drive more engagement, and if more people engage, you've set the path to that conversion you're looking for. So whether page views, whether impressions, whether sign up, they're all important. Marketing is a system. We should all put them into perspective. We should have that intention to drive all of them. So because at the end of the day, it all affects the final goal.
I think that's very beautifully put, Henry. Marketing is a system, and just looking at things in isolation is never going to get us anywhere. Thank you so much, Henry. I think this has been a very actionable, insightful session. How to write content which developers actually trust, and how to make sure that it ties back to business results. And thank you so much for sharing your playbook. I think it'll help a lot of us rethink how to approach technical content.
Thank you so much for having me.